Good evening, everyone. I am Aldren Fuentes, and in this report, I will be talking about ethnography. This is actually a qualitative research methodology. When we say ethnography, this is a research about the culture of a certain group of people. It is actually the work of describing the culture, telling what the culture is all about, telling what's in it, what's the structure of it, and how it is related with each other. When we study the culture in ethnography, it is not just studying the people. We are not there to study only the behavior of the people, but we are actually a part of that group of people. So it means that doing an ethnography is actually learning about people. It's learning about how they live, it's learning about how they interact and how they socialize with one another. So it means that in ethnography, it is a requirement that each and every one of us should be living with the people that we are learning. Okay po? So we live with the people and we live with them. Now, ethnography has four major schools of thought. Okay, there are four major ethnographic schools of thought. The first one is what we call classical ethnography. When we say classical ethnography, it aims to describe everything about the culture, describe what you see, what you observe, describe what you understand about the culture of the people that you are learning. When we talk about the second one, which is the systematic ethnography, you are looking or focusing your look on the structure of the culture, what organizes the study group or your population's lifeways. Okay po. The third ethnographic school of thought is what we call interpretive ethnography. Okay po, wherein we are interested in studying the culture through the analysis of inferences and implications found in the behavior of our in the behavior of the people or of the study group. Now, another important aspect or another important school of thought in ethnography is what we call critical ethnography. In critical ethnography, we are interested in studying the culture, okay? The culture based on its non-existence, but on the existence of a cultural schema. Okay po? It is actually focusing on the injustices and oppression, very much like with the Marxist theory of the society. So, in critical ethnography, we are understanding people's behavior, people's culture by the effect of historical accounts, social accounts, and economic situations. Okay po? Now, when we do an ethnography, we have to understand the fundamental characteristics. When we do the ethnography, it is much very likely and it is very much different with the regular research because the primary research instrument or the tool to collect your data, okay, in the culture will be you, the researcher himself. You being the researcher, you are the tool that will describe the culture of the people. It requires intimacy with the participants who are part of the culture. So therefore, ethnography as a method of inquiry provides an opportunity for the researcher to conduct studies that focuses on personal and sometimes intimate experiences of the members based on what we see. Okay po? Which is why the ethnographer becomes now the conduit of information shared by the group. It means that you are the way or the passageway of information of the culture of the group of people that you are observing, that you are living in. Okay po? When you or when we talk about the ethnographer as the research instrument, it is indicated that the researcher plays an important role in identifying, interpreting, and analyzing the culture that you are studying. Now, another characteristic of ethnography is what we call the field work. When we say field work, it requires the researchers to be always on site, to be always and on site where culture occurs. You have to do field work. You have to be always outside to get the culture and understand it. It means to say that ethnography requires field work, okay? Requires immersion. So to the culture that you are studying. Now, another characteristic of ethnography is that the nature of data collection is cyclic. When you say cyclic, it is always repeating, it is always continue the process of interviewing, observing, reviewing, and analyzing the data and returning to the field to do more interviews. That's the real world of ethnographers. So if it doesn't stop when you collect your data at one point in ethnography, because in ethnography, you need to continuously validate the life way of the people that you are studying, so that you will know what are the collective meaning, you will know what are the collective artifacts of the group. Okay po? Now, another important aspect of the ethnography is the focus on the culture. Okay, because in ethnography, it is the only research method who seeks to understand the life ways of individuals connected through group membership. Another characteristics of ethnography is the depth and length of participation. Usually, when you do the ethnography, it requires more than a year to properly collect the data, because uh, much of the life ways of the people cannot be understood in a single data collection. So, ethnographers or those who are doing ethnography are actually doing it for more than 12 months. It takes time because they are there to immerse themselves to the culture, okay? Because they have to live so that they can learn properly. And last, the last characteristic of ethnography is that it is characterized by its reflexivity, or the ability or the struggle between the researcher's point of view, no, and the and telling the culture from the insider's point of view. So when we say telling the culture based on insider's point of view, that's what we call your emic perspective, no. For example, if you are the group of people that I will be studying, your perspective on a certain social issue will be the emic perspective. Okay? Now, emic perspective is important because it is, or this is, the real life way of the people being observed. It is different from epic perspective. When we say epic perspective in ethnography, epic perspective means it is the point of view of the researcher, which is, for example, I am the one observing you. My perspective on your point of view. No, that's different from epic perspective, because my epic perspective is influenced by my bias, my by my my life views. Okay po. Same thing with the emic perspective. So the more important content in doing ethnography is reflecting in the emic perspective of the people that you are studying. Okay. Now, when do we use ethnography as a method? Well, as we have mentioned earlier, one of the goal of ethnography is to make explicit what is implicit within a culture. So it means that you are going to reflect what's in the backstage or the latent culture in addition to what is explicit or public or manifested aspects of culture. Now, cultural knowledge requires understanding of the people, what they do, what they say, how they relate to one another, and what their customs and beliefs are. Okay? And how they derive meaning from their experience. So for us, educators, there are actually a lot of undiscovered culture. The way students choose or prefer their teacher is an undiscovered culture. The way the learner learn inside the culture, inside the classroom, is also an undiscovered culture, and many, many more. So therefore, if you want to understand this culture, understand this different perspective, you have to use ethnography. Now, when doing an ethnography, there are several methods, okay, of interpreting the data. Okay, the first one is the holistic interpretation, or as a whole. The holistic interpretation refers to the oldest tradition of ethnography or ethnographic interpretation. So the commitment of the researcher is to study the culture as an integrated whole. So it means that you look at the culture in its holistic point of view as a whole and not by part. Okay? Another important interpretation method in ethnography is what we call your semiotic or individual viewpoint. Semiotic interpretation focuses on gaining access to the native's viewpoint. No, it means that you view that the culture not as a mean to define the law, but or the law that guides the whole culture, but as an interpretive enterprise focused on searching for meaning. Therefore, to get the meaning of the whole culture, all you have to do is to achieve cultural understanding. All you have to do is to achieve sick description. It means that you need to collect large amount of data collected in an extended period of time. So it means that in what do you call this, in ethnography, it's important to collect data over extended periods of time so that you can understand the individual viewpoint and do semiotic interpretation. Now, the third interpretation model of ethnography is what we call holistic or your behavioral interpretation. Now, ethnographers use this approach or are most interested in the members of the culture. The main goal is to uncover the patterns, no, in observe behavior. This approach is actually deductive, meaning ethnographers use this method use specifically cultural situations that substantiate selected category of data. The use of this interpretation deviate radically from the intent of the other two interpretations, which provides solely on induction. So the first two is actually inductive in nature. It means that you start from smaller pieces of data and then combine them to make a whole understanding of the culture. But it's different with behavioral. In behavioral, you look at a certain condition and see whether one part of it will apply to each situation. And if it connects to this great body of knowledge, then we can interpret how the people are behaving. So that's how behavioral interpretation goes. Now, how do we do the process of ethnography? Okay, um, going the process of ethnography involves the first one, no, which is to understand the research role, the researcher's role. It means we need to understand what are our role in data collection, or what are our role in the community. Next is to gain access. Gaining access means we identify the future that we want to study. Third is to make participant observation means we make ourselves part of the culture that we are studying. So when we go inside the culture, we'll live the way of the people, we'll live the ways that they live. There is a saying that goes that when you are in Rome, do what the Romans do. So it's like what's the participant's observation. Okay? When you are in their lives, you have to do what they are doing. Okay? In ethnography. Next is to make an ethnographic record. An ethnographic record is an initial understanding of the place that you are studying. Right there, you try to understand the situation, no, uh, on meaning on the first look basis. Now, the next step is to make descriptive observation. Now that you have lived the life of the people, you are starting to live with it during your immersion in the community. You make descriptive observation. Okay, you describe. You give the physical location of the action, or you state the place or and the actor in that particular place, the activities or what they do, the objects that are involved, the the actions that they are performing, even the event, the time, the goals, and your personal feelings. No, make up your descriptive observation. Now, after making your descriptive observation, you do now the first layer of analysis. Okay, the first layer of analysis is making domain analysis. When we say making domain analysis, you look on a particular situation that has cultural meaning. Let's say, for example, in a house where they are eating, you observe that a group of people are eating together at the same time in the evening. They are eating together um, at dinner at 7 p.m., and you took particular notice of the situation. Now, that particular analysis, upon seeing that there is a meaning in it, okay, that's already your domain analysis, because you try to understand a certain part of their life. Do you get me? So that's particular situation. Now, after that, you may focus on observation. Again, you go back to the situation, you observe why is it important, you observe what happens during that time. Okay? Then after you have observed or lived or okay, then after you have observed or lived on a focused observation, that's the time that you do a taxonomic analysis. What are the structures? What are the different components? Or what are the structures of that particular situation, of that particular culture? So you try to understand the structure. So when we say structure, it means that what's the relationship of each of what's the meaning of eating together, and it is related to the culture in the lives. Okay, that's taxonomic analysis. After doing the taxonomic analysis, you go back again to selective observation. Okay, so it's a more finer form of observation, and look now on the individual component of that particular culture. So after you have done your selective observation, you will make a componential analysis. Okay, the last layer of analysis in ethnography. Now, of course, after writing your componential analysis, the final set is to write a cultural theme. Okay? Now, when you do your ethnography, always remember the ethical considerations, okay? Like a consent, because you're living with the lives of the people of your subject, or the people that you are learning. You need to get informed consent. Is it okay to observe their lives? Because you are actually involving your life. Sometimes there's a rift also with the study population. More often than not, in doing ethnography would usually involve the cultural minority. It may be a risk to this population because they are vulnerable, they are powerless in society because they are in cultural minority, and sometimes they are powerless to protect themselves. So we have to make sure that conflict is mitigated and should be avoided. And lastly, in doing ethical ethnography, you have you should have an ability to do the research. Usually, ethnography is done by group of researchers. There's a supervisor and there are apprentices. So the apprentices are guided by the supervisor because no or there are very few people that are capable of doing ethnography. So they have to be guided by the supervisor before they can perform ethnography by themselves. So the ability of the researchers in the research should be um, taking into consideration um, when you do your ethnography. And in summary, ano nga ba yung ethnography talaga? Let us emphasize that in this type of research, you study a group of people in a particular place or in their environment. Here, you as a researcher, you are required to engage yourself with your participants or to immerse with them in a period of time. Kaya sa pamamagitan nito, you will be able to characterize your participants' behaviors, their traits, their culture, and their challenges, and the possible occurring themes. Mga classmates, napakaganda ng type of qualitative research na ito. In this ethnographic research, we can get real time the data that we need. Kasi nandun na nga, di ba? Nandun na tayo sa environment o sa place kung saan naroon yung ating mga participants. Hence, we can obtain first-hand information and high-quality data directly from our source. Therefore, the information is said to be legitimate, more realistic, and authentic. Kasi nandun tayo di ba? Mga classmates, napaka-interesting gawin nitong ethnographic research na ito. Aside from the things that we have mentioned, yung ethnographic research ay flexible. Flexible ang ethnographic research kasi it allows you to explore the social dynamics, the culture of a group, Therefore, it will help you to gain detailed information or accurate experiences of your participants. And kung itatanong ninyo kung anong data collection method yung ginagamit sa ethnographic research na ito, well, of course, observation is the primary, while secondary is interview and the use of survey. So I think I have given you the details about ethnographic research, and I think kaya naman natin gawin to. And of course, dahil very interesting and very exciting siyang gawin, I know and I believe magiging mas madali at mas less stressful ito. Ganun naman tayo kasi, 'di ba, no? Kasi pag meron tayong bagay na gagawin, para hindi tayo mahirapan, kailangan interesado tayo, gusto natin itong gawin, at motivated tayong tapusin ito. And speaking of tatapusin, hindi natin tatapusin yung report ko na to without showing you samples of research titles using ethnography. Eto yon. With that being said, with that being presented, classmates, I think I have given you already much information about ethnography. Sana naman po ay may natutunan kayo ngayon sa akin, and hopefully in the next days or in the future, we can use ethnography as our research type. Thank you again for listening, and once again, I am Aldren Fuentes, and see you again soon.